Look, it's something that we will all experience at some point, yet so many of us struggle to talk about it. So after the death of her husband from bowel cancer at just 44 years old, Stacey Heale, what a gorgeous surname for what you're about to do, healing. She wants to break some of the taboos around grief, and she's sharing her experience in a new book. It's called Now Is Not the Time for Flowers, What No One Tells You About Life, Love and Loss. And Stacey is here. I say heal because it's not one of those books where it's sort of full of affirmations and things like that. It's a book that is raw. And I think that's probably, you're giving other people, in a way, permission for grief to be incredibly messy and sort of, well, uncomfortable, and you can get it wrong and you can get it right, and we don't really know what wrong and right is in grief.
Yeah, that's exactly why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
I think when I was going through my husband Greg's terminal cancer diagnosis, I was searching for stories that reflected back to me how I felt, which was messy and complicated. And I didn't find that. I found lots of voices that were 5 steps of what to say to someone who's grieving, or very kind of methodical ways of moving through that kind of situation. And it didn't reflect anything of how I felt at all. And that was my starting.
And how old were your children at the point that Greg passed away?
When he died, they were 5 and 7.
Just absolutely, just awful. Because at that age, how much can you tell them? And you discussed that in the book about the moment that you had to tell them about his diagnosis, and then, of course, the fact that he had passed away.
Yeah. The toughest days of my life, I would say,
Yeah.
is the day where we had to tell them that he was going to die. When we were told that he had weeks to live, we had to tell them, obviously, and it's really important of like how we talk to children in those spaces, because we like to think that, you know, they don't really know what's going on, but they do. They really do, because they sense things, and they really need to be told quite factually what's happening. And
what I think is really interesting in the book as well is that you say that let's not mistake the fact that kids then can go, OK, can I go and play next door now?
Yeah.
Or can we go to the park now? Like that sort of, it looks like resilience. It looks like that playing around in a garden centre is them sort of, oh, they're coping really well, you know. Actually, you're saying don't be fooled by that in some ways.
Absolutely. And I saw that with my own eyes, with my own children, of like telling them their dad's going to die, and then literally a few minutes later they're saying, can we go and play in the garden? And I found that it's called something called puddle jumping, which is where children, they just don't have the brain capacity, obviously, to deal with those emotions. So they can jump in and out of them. They can deal with it for a certain amount of time, and then they need to move on.
And that puddle is waiting.
Yeah,
it's always
absolutely.
waiting to be jumped back into in different ways. And you talk about, interestingly, how social media actually became a bit of a lifesaver for you after Greg passed away and during, actually, his diagnosis.
Oh, beforehand, I think. I would say when he was first diagnosed with cancer, I was still breastfeeding my youngest daughter.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the workshop about chemotherapy, and everyone was in their 70s. And I felt so different to everyone else. So I didn't even have a social media account when he was diagnosed. And I found on Instagram in particular this incredible community of people who were just talking really honestly about what was going on
Dame
for them.
Deborah, of course, a great friend of this show.
A great friend of mine.
Yeah.
And weirdly, Dame Debs was the very, very first person that I was put in contact with, because actually her and Greg were diagnosed in the same week in 2016.
And there's so many beautiful moments in there. And actually, there's a sort of bizarre moment where you say that when you rang the funeral directors, you couldn't stop laughing hysterically in a sort of really bizarre way.
Yeah. Well, no one tells you what that experience is like.
Yeah.
And it hit me that I had no idea what to say to them, because how do you know?
So all this
How do
nervous
you know?
laughter kept bubbling up.
I mean, and that is the thing about trauma and grief and death, is that there's no rule book, and no one. We're all going to go through this.
Yeah.
But no one tells you what to do, what to expect, what it looks like.
And just to quickly, because we're sort of slightly running out of time, but what you wore to your husband's funeral caused a few eyebrow raises, didn't it, from friends and family? Because you loved fashion and you thought, fashion is the way I express myself, so I'm going to use it. What was the theme that you went with?
Italian mafia widow.
Yes, Italian mafia widow for your husband's funeral. And people were like, that's a bit extravagant. But you thought, I'm doing it my own way.
Absolutely. Well, it was my armour, I would say, and yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful book, Stacey. Thank you so much for writing it. It's out soon.
Next week, but available for pre-order now.
There we go.